This was a very insightful conversation about parents to children relationship, how children or teens can improve their relationship with technology, and how parents and children can reduce the misunderstandings which they normally have with each other, and how they can become close to each other and how they can improve their relationship for the long term and the short term future. And this conversation was with Catherine Knibbs, who is a clinical and academic researcher and an IT tech person and an engineer for over 25 years. She's also a trauma psychotherapist and works with both adults and children. And more interestingly, her book about children and technology and how they can develop healthily will come out next month. So make sure you visit the links I put down below to purchase that book. So without wasting any more time, let's get into the podcast. So Catherine, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you very much for inviting me to come and chat.
Actually, I'm very much looking forward to it because I have seen people either working for the mental aspect or for technology, but I have never seen someone working for both. And I think that sparked my interest when I first saw your book or your profile and I was reading about you. And I thought that this is going to be a very useful conversation because these days, young people like me and my friends have a very deep connection with technology, and they're not aware of the impact, whether it be good or bad. They're not aware of the impact of technology, I think. Yeah. And so I think it'll be a great way to educate myself and my peers as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, any kind of question you have, I don't have definitive answers because one of the things about technology, Mishra, is we don't know the full impact yet. And there's a lot of scare tactics. There's a lot of hyperbolic rubbish. There is a lot of technology-based interventions coming out. And then we have, parents being very scared. And actually, the people who are in this arena are young people like yourself. So, I'm all for understanding what your experience is like. And that's why I went and wrote the book, mainly so that I could educate parents as well, because they don't always understand why young people are using technology, nor do they understand exactly what it is that young people.
I think there was some connection issues.
There were, yes, a technological glitch, and that's technology of 2021, isn't it?
Actually, I do not blame technology because different areas have different types of internet, and as I'm not from that much of advanced country, my internet is a little bit poor in terms of other countries, more developed countries. But I think I am ready. I'm trying to make full use of technology as much as I can through experiences like these. And I think when my parents was of my age, they could not even imagine of something which I am doing right now,
No.
And that's why I think I see many people of my age, or I think I should not say the term waste, but I do feel like they do waste a lot of time on things which are based on entertainment, but I think they should focus more on learning. At the end of the day, it's their personal choice, and it's my personal choice as well, but it's a great opportunity. I feel like it's a very big opportunity.
Yes. One of the things that I talk about in my book is I don't see it as wasted time because each person is carrying out a different reason for why they're using technology. So, for example, you might be passively taking in some information. You might be actively engaged in a conversation. You might be reading to educate yourself. You might be looking at images to get some inspiration. You could be using an Excel spreadsheet. So, you know, the actual activity looks the same to a third person or an outsider looking in, because we're not in your head and we can't see what you're doing. And one of the things that I talk about in the book as well is social media is about socializing. So even though the documentary Social Dilemma says it's about being addicted and, you know, the algorithms drive you to stay on the platforms, that's the same as being at a party and not wanting to leave. And people, you're addicted to a party, you're addicted to cricket or football. We say that you have a hobby or you have a passion. And I think sometimes this is where the misunderstanding happens, because I even take the humorous approach around people sitting at computers all day like I used to in technology, and we didn't get told that we had screen addiction. We didn't get told that we had Excel disorder. It seems to be something that young people have been labelled with. And at the end of the day, Mashra, all of you will be doing something that involves connection, communication, conversation, and it's about your what we call the modus operandi. It's about why you're doing what you're doing, not what is it that you're doing, why are you doing it? And I'm always interested in why. Why does somebody sit on Facebook for 2 hours? Well, if they come from a family where, you know, the only 2 hours in that day that they get to talk to their friends are outside of, for example, university or primary school, that's what they do. And even gaming is about conversations and communications and relationships and playing as a team. So I tend to veer away from the word addiction, because it's not the same as drinking alcohol. It's not the same as smoking cigarettes, because those are passive activities that you engage in, and there isn't an underlying reason. People who drink alcohol may well go to a pub, but that's about socializing as well. If they're, you know, drinking in a cupboard underneath the stairs, that's a very different reason for doing what we're doing. And I think this is one of the issues with media and I'm going to call them the grown-ups of the world who invented the internet, who are now pathologizing and labeling your age groups with, you know, in air quotes, something wrong. And I don't see it that way.
But, you know, as far as I know, there has been a direct relationship in between the availability of technology and, you know, the depression rate amongst teens or people in general. But on the other hand, as you said, that people are getting the chance to socialize, to meet new people, to make new friends on social media. But wasn't that supposed to make them happy? Like, what's going on behind the scene?
Yeah, so excuse me. I'm also a functional health practitioner, as well as what I do as a psychotherapist. And depression is complicated. It's not a one size fits all. People can present in a psychotherapy room with me with depression and still have that they go to work. They can have depression and still attend social events. They can have depression and have anxiety that sits alongside it. They can have depression and not get out of bed. So when I see particularly the media saying, oh, look, there's a correlation between depression for young people and the use or the proclivity of phones, and what they're trying to do is tie these two things together and say, since the invention of technology, depression has increased. But so the world has changed since 2007. One of the biggest differences for your age group is many of the parents of 2000 plus have both had to go to work. That's within lots of countries. And that has a real impact on children's self-esteem, their self-identity. They don't necessarily have a great relationship with their parents if they have. So in the United Kingdom, they have what they call breakfast clubs. So children go to school at 7 o'clock in the morning so their parents can go to work, and they're surrounded by other children in what was probably for your parents and myself a time where in a morning people breakfasted together or they ate evening dinner together. And those times have really changed for a lot of young people in terms of parents and the need to be in and around work. And also, you know, we've had lots of austerity, we've had lots of financial issues. The world is a very, very high performing place at the moment. And there's a lot of pressure on parents and children because a lot of the education systems are expecting children to pass exams at the age of 10, pass exams at the age of 15, pass exams at the age of 18, stay in education till they're in university. And all the while, they are not changing the education system. It's a very rote system that they go through, and there isn't any expansion for gifted children, creative children, children who aren't really interested in the normal curriculum. And unfortunately, because we have this system that's very, very confined in terms of education, children are being pressurized to make large decisions for the rest of their life. I mean, I sit with my clients, and it's the things I do as a therapist as well as a mum. I remember what it was like at 14, and I didn't know what I wanted to do at 14. I had so many ideas. I wanted to go into science. I wanted to go into, you know, something to do with maybe chemistry or biology. I didn't want to go near physics. And then it turns out I went and actually did physics as a job. So, you know, I think it's a lot of pressure for young people to suddenly find they have to perform academically. And because technology allows people to see how well we're pitted against each other, that competition is really, really difficult. And for me, it's a big, complicated soup as to why somebody might have depression. And yes, the phones have, and smartphones and technology have created a bigger environment for that competition to take place. And young people are not necessarily educated by their parents and by the village and by the society to handle that level of competition. And what we did do was we created lots of social media platforms, but didn't understand the impact this would have on children because the developers were interested in making money. And they weren't interested in how will this be used by brains that are not fully developed. And because they weren't thinking that way, because technologists are not child education specialists.
Do you think companies like social media companies should be held accountable for the impact they're having on children?
Yes, I think there needs to be a certain amount of regulation. But what I would say is I think the larger, so I think the politicians, the people who are at the top of the hierarchy, they are allowing, and I'm going to use the word here, allowing these big platforms to make decisions which, you know, all the way through the last 2 years, I'm watching a huge change that, you know, for example, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, they're all, and it's around censorship, but they've suddenly become judge, jury, and executioner. And I don't understand why a tech company that's created a social media platform is allowed to make those decisions about who and what and where we can carry out our own thinking. It's very oppressive, especially for your age group, because one of the beautiful things about adolescence and maturing is your ability to think critically. And if your information is not as broad as it could be, you're not going to have the capability to learn how to think critically if you're only spoon-fed particular information. And we know this from the education system because children have history taught to them in a particular way. So, for example, English children are taught the history of kings and queens and the wars that occurred here. If you go to America, they're taught about American history. If you go to India, so we're not getting a 360-degree education, which means that we can't think in a 360-degree way. It's limiting.
I think it's a very valid point you've made because, you know, from today's world's perspective, it is important to have the 360-degree idea, as you mentioned, because no, I don't see the world no longer as a single place. I think that due to the rise of technology, internet, and the speed of globalization and trade, I think you cannot see the world as an individual village or a country as an individual village, because if you have to excel in your life and have to gain knowledge and have to meet people, you will have to have some kind of, you know, basic idea about what happened in the past. But as you mentioned before, that, you know, education system, I think education system needs some kind of improvement. And I don't know what kind of improvement it is, but I think, you know, COVID-19 has already triggered some kind of change, and I don't know whether it's good or bad kind of change, because some people, I feel like they can learn better through online education, and some people have, you know, some kind of anxiety, or as they cannot see face to face and meet people face to face, they, you know, it has some kind of mental impact. Also, in some underdeveloped countries where the infrastructure is not that much good, and where not everyone has the ability to, you know, buy the tech products, I feel like they're lagging behind. And the people who are, you know, rich and has that ability, they can get the online education. Another thing I want to mention is that I think this COVID-19 has, like, if you just leave behind the COVID-19 for a second and think about the education thing. You know, last year I had my EdXL exam, AS exam, and I went for predicted grades. And this time also I went for predicted grades. And, you know, there's so much of uncertainty, like, you know, what will the grades be? And they gave grades once and then they changed again, because we have no idea how they, you know, gave the grades, what algorithm did they set up, and, you know, what kind of system did they set up, and how did they get the result, and they changed the result again. So I think that created a certain kind of distrust amongst students. So, like, do you see any kind of, you know, mental impact due to the COVID-19 and the increase in studies pressure amongst children?
Yes. So one of the things that I've noticed in my practice is certainly with the younger children who couldn't really sit still for a long period of time in front of a screen to do their learning the same way that they could in a classroom, because one of the beautiful skills about teachers is they are often able to watch what's going on the tables and see what's happening between the children, and sometimes picking up who's struggling, who isn't. So that wasn't happening for a lot of children. And what I noticed was, for the very young age, and I would say certainly for the primary school age, that parents are not teachers. They're not educated to teach, and they have a very difficult time trying to explain simple terms such as you know, division, early mathematics, or language skills for a lot of the children, and, you know, thinking of English literature and grammar, that one of the things that was difficult was the parents were being expected to be the teachers in the homes. And of course, it was leading to lots of discord, lots of arguments, lots of children having meltdowns. And it really wasn't feeling very healthy for the young children. But what I did notice for particularly the adolescents, so these are mainly the 15, 16 plus, is they were effectively being left to their own accord. And of course, one of the things that we do need throughout our lifetime, but certainly as adolescents, is a guiding hand. And if you're told, just go up to your bedroom, just go and sit at your computer, have you done your learning? One of the things that young people will do is not do what they're supposed to. So I know of young people who were sleeping during lectures, turning their camera off, and, you know, either gaming, going on social media, reading a book, going, you know, having a nap, and not doing what they would do, which is that's created by being in a group of people, which is to feel that we're all in this together, all learning together, and I can share my lack of knowledge or my knowledge with you, depending on each person's perspective and preferences. And what I was finding is it felt very insular, very, very lonely, very isolating. And for me, I think that would be the biggest impact of this online learning is you're right. I like to be in a room of people to learn, not because it does anything other than give me a sense of community, belonging, and we're all doing this together. And yeah, I like the competition of understanding something as a teacher is describing it, or, you know, as a new theory comes out and it's being explained. I get quite a buzz off being in a room with people that are excited by it. When it comes to online learning at home, I am the same as the adolescents. I will go, I'll do it later. And I go off and do something else. And then I never quite get to what I'm supposed to be doing, because it's so individual. And whilst I can read a book in my own time because I want to, I don't find the same kind of learning happens for me via an online medium. I do like to be able to talk to people and, you know, rationalize and bat about ideas. But I think for young people, it's also been a positive impact. For those who might be or might have learning difficulties, they've actually found the isolation really nice, because it means that they're not getting what I enjoy, which is that kind of competition and human connection. And it means they can learn in their own time at their own pace without feeling like they're not meeting their peers' learning levels.
I think that's a very interesting point you made. What I realized is that even after the pandemic ends, I don't think it's going to end anytime soon, because, you know, it's rising up again in some places. So yeah, even after it ends, I think some of the world will still remain online, and might have to adapt to the change. So how can young people like me, you know, face the problems like of loneliness and, you know, anxiety, and adapt to the new world?
So, I mean, if I just give you the statistics on, and this is why I'm really partly not bothered about what the media says about young people's technology use. What I do know is one of the biggest killers of people in general, right the way across the planet, is loneliness. So it's not heart disease, it's not cancer, it's not diabetes, it's loneliness. And I'm going to talk about my book just for a second. One of the things that's inherent within our biology is a need to be around other people. And it begins when we're born, and we call it attachment theory, that we need to be looked after by somebody else because otherwise we won't survive. So we have this real innate drive to be in a relationship of whatever description, so whether it's a familial relationship, a friendship, a romantic relationship, we need our collective. We need people around us. And when we are rejected, or we feel like we're rejected, so this is the being at home on your own, I don't feel like people want me to be around them. That's pretty much the feeling of loneliness, or I'm not wanted. That starts really triggering those early experiences of I'm going to die. Because if you think about a baby's feelings, if a baby is not looked after, they will die. It's a fact. They do need people to pay attention and to cuddle them and to feed them. But we need what's called psychological contact, not just feeding and looking after. We need psychological contact. And we know this from psychology, and yet what's not appearing in the media is that the isolation and loneliness is that feeling of I'm going to wither and die, and I'm going to be alone, and nobody wants me, and I feel rejected and abandoned. And it's a really distressing feeling. And that feeling can actually cause or be correlated with lots and lots of physical illnesses. So, there is it's often called an old wives' tale or a myth, but dying of a broken heart is a real thing. People can literally feel so sad and lonely because their romantic partner's died, that they will die within a short period of time of their partner dying. And it's a known physical impact, but we do tend to, say things like, oh, it's a myth. That's just what people say because it hurts so badly. But there's a lot of science that comes out to say that's not how it is. It really is that bad. So when it comes to being isolated, and of course, we've had almost 18 months of being told you cannot go near other people. And the terminology that's been used, particularly by a lot of the countries, which is social distancing, really irks me, because we are physically distancing, and social distancing is something that we do with our psychology. So the politicians, the governments have been saying you are on your own. And that's frightening. That is so frightening to the biology and the inherent psyche of a human, that we have all felt like we are alone and we're going to die. And of course, we are absolutely terrified of this virus that none of us can see. So we're really frightened of a concept and a construct and a virus all at the same time. And I think one of the ways that we counteract that is something called interpersonal connection or intersubjectivity. That means we need to be in spaces and places we feel safe. And if that's our home, then we still need to be able to do that through technology. We need to be able to create a safe space. So for a lot of young people, they have used gaming and social media to manage their mental health throughout lockdown. And I'm not saying it's been a substitute, but it has been for some children an absolute godsend. I think for older people, the fact that they can make phone calls as well as FaceTime, is something that's also helping them. But we do need inherently to be close to other people to feel their energy. That's one of the things that we need as a human species. So, whilst I love technology, and whilst I talk about what technology brings us, there is something about your biology cannot beat being around another human being, because it really can help you feel safe intrinsically. And whilst I'm suggesting here that forums, conversation rooms, whether you create a WhatsApp group, whether you have a gaming community, whatever it is, there needs to be some form of communication between yourself and another person to lower that feeling of isolation and loneliness.
Even this pandemic has triggered, personally for me, it has like triggered my anxiety level and my stress level and fear of death. But these things, in some cases, or in some cultures, it's a very taboo thing to talk about, mental illnesses or aspects, especially if you're a young person, and they sometimes be like, you don't have any responsibilities, you don't have anything to look after, so why are you feeling like this? Why are you feeling this anxiety? Or why are you feeling, why are you feeling bad? So, how do you, break this kind of thinking so that young people can get help out of it?
So, I mean, for me, this is where I love doing my job working with children, because I get to talk to the parents. So, it is not unusual for adults to say exactly what you've said there. You can't have anxiety because there's nothing for you to worry about in the world. And I have to explain to a lot of the parents, it's not to do with cognition. Anxiety is a bodily sensation that creates. So the way your body and mind works is whatever your body sensates, whatever's going on for it somatically, it's transported to the brain, and the brain tries to make sense of all of that information. And if that information is telling you, so there's a theory called polyvagal theory that I tend to lean on. And in this theory, the gentleman who put it together said your nervous system does a threat detection. It's always scanning its environment to see whether you're safe or not, and whether there's a level of threat. So I explain it as it's like Wi-Fi. So you are your own little Wi-Fi router, and your Wi-Fi router tells you whether the world is safe. And if you see adults that look scary, because maybe they're cross, or maybe they've come home late, or, maybe they've just forgotten something from the supermarket, or, maybe some of the politicians have just said something on TV that's made them cross because, they've been told they can't go back to work yet, and they've got financial difficulties, then children will pick up, ooh, something could be dangerous. And the moment your body thinks, ooh, that could be dangerous, it sends a message to your brain, and your brain kind of deciphers it in certain areas that are called the limbic system, and makes sense of it at the part that kind of makes sense of it. And it will generally say, ooh, err on the side of caution. You need to be on high alert. And that feeling of being on high alert is anxiety. Anxiety is like being on a rocking chair. What if this? What if that? What if this? What if that? What if this? And you can rock on that rocking chair for a long time. And parents are sometimes too busy, sometimes don't notice, sometimes can't soothe their children to help them learn how to deal with anxiety when they're little. And that means that by the time they grow up, they don't always have the inner tools to be able to go, oh, I'm worried about, that's okay, because that might not happen. What your brain does is it goes, aha, but it might. And if you don't then have the capacity to say, oh, there I go again, overthinking, doing too much thinking ahead and going on that rocking chair, then you will do something that's called being dysregulated. And that's what anxiety is. Anxiety is worrying or thinking about things that could, might, or perhaps might happen. And your brain is there to keep you alive. It says, err on the side of caution, make sure that on this occasion, we definitely know for sure, because you never know what's around the corner. So it always goes for this, well, it could have been. So let's just put that down as this time we survived, but next time it could be something that kills you. And so what I find with a lot of the parents is I help them learn to understand their children's nervous systems, how the nervous system helps the thinking, and why even being told something at school by another peer, say for example, so in the UK, quite a lot of the young boys go through usually at some point when they're growing, they will do something different with their hair. And if they are teased by one of their peers, they can come home and it can be very much, oh my goodness, they must think that I'm a girl for having long hair. And of course, take that into technology. And if somebody says, oh my God, your mum was laughing at you, ha ha ha, that, you know, then what that child will do is now start to worry about what's going to happen when they go to school the following day. So they might go to bed and start to go, I've got tummy ache, my head hurts, I don't feel well. And more often than not, parents are busy, they can't take a day off work because that has a financial impact. So parents make statements that they do with the best of intentions, but children can misinterpret what they mean. And they might say things like, you haven't got anxiety, you haven't got a tummy ache. Here, take a headache pill, you'll be fine, you're still going to school. And actually, the underlying message is somebody said something mean and I'm worried what they might do tomorrow. I'm worried what they might say next. So I think in terms of anxiety and particularly what's gone on with the lockdown, I did a blog just as we went into lockdown in 2020. And I called it the biggest cyber trauma to date, because not only did we have the World Health Organization, the CDC, we had the US politicians, basically every single country was telling you something on the news, on the TV channels, whatever it was, whether it was on the radio, whether it was on social media, you know, stay 2 meters away, don't touch this, wash your food, stay indoors, don't talk to people. And it was absolutely terrifying. And just to top it off, people then got very scared. And, you know, in a number of countries, there was a toilet paper crisis because people panicked. And not only was there a toilet paper crisis, people then took pictures of it and videos and they shared them and they said, well, this is what's going to happen with COVID. And of course, what that did do was it made this anxiety feeling within all of us absolutely heightened. And information was, often it would clash. There would be hypocritical statements made by politicians, do this, no, actually don't do that, do this instead.
It was getting thrown around, all around.
Oh, it was total hysteria. And because of the way that it was communicated, our brains did what they're supposed to do. They panicked. And of course, that's had a big impact on many of us who don't know how to deal with panic. So if you didn't get given the tools as a child and your parents didn't get given the tools when they were children and their parents didn't get given the tools when they were children, then many of us don't actually know how to hold and handle the feelings of anxiety, because anxiety is quite, you know, for a lot of children, it's in their tummy or it's in their heart, it's in their breathing, it's in their overthinking. And this is all a nervous system, innate human response to any threat detected. So for lots of us, we have behaved with a totally normal response to a threat.
Now I was thinking that parents are the ones who love the children the most, but and even the children know that as well. But even if they love them the most, sometimes they cannot communicate. Children cannot communicate their problems with their parents, especially about, you know, mental problems or, you know, in any personal problem. So how can children, you know, develop that relation? I know it comes from both ways, but how can children develop that relationship with their parents so that, you know, they can talk about deep things and personal things? Sometimes, you know, because sometimes parents stay busy, and when you try to, you know, communicate with them, they might not pay attention to that, and this creates a distance between parents and children. Moreover, due to the rise of the internet culture, I think there's a larger gap between today's young generation an older generation compared to previous generations. So, how do you, reduce the gap and bring both parties close together so that they can communicate about each other?
So, I mean, yes, there is an idea that children need to be able to talk to their parents. And I'm going to do a big however, and that is parents are the ones who are there to educate their children in how to do that. Okay, so this is what we do as parents. So the word discipline often gets used as to mean a punishment, but the word actually means to teach. So when we are raising our children, so to speak, giving them language in which they can explain what's going on. So for example, like that example that I gave about tummy ache, that's a child communicating that part of so it's known as the vagal system, and this is what we call the dorsal vagal. So this is below the diaphragm. When you are dysregulated, your gut will tell you something's wrong. That's why we have phrases like gut feeling. So a child doesn't have the lexicon. So this is the language to be able to say, oh, my tummy is gurgling and I'm not sure what it is. It could be diarrhea. It could be a tummy bug, or it could be that I'm very, very anxious. So what children will say, particularly up to about the age of 9 or 10, is that they've got tummy ache, or they'll say it hurts, or it just feels like, so I will talk to children and I'll say, so tell me what it's like. Is it big? Is it small? Is it always there? Is it not there? And what they tend to do is talk about it's like, so they might say it's like a ball of wool, or it's like a spiky ball. And that's the privilege I get for being able to ask children, tell me more about that in a way that I can understand. So if they say it's like a spiky ball, I go, oh, so it must be very painful, whereas a ball of wool is quite squishy. So I can get the sensation. But when it comes to technology, and I think this is why I'm so keen, not only have I got the first book out at the minute, I'm already writing the second book in terms of the cyber traumas, because that's actually what I deal with. And it's something I've been doing for nearly 10 years. How on earth does a 7 or 17-year-old go to a parent and say, I just watched an execution, I just watched animal abuse, I just watched pornography scene that was horrifically violent? How do I do that as a 7 or 17-year-old? And what I would say is it's too difficult, because how do you describe it? And what's the first thing that you think your parents are going to do when you do describe that? Is you're going to get your device taken away from you. It will be used in a punitive way. And more often than not,
they'll try to control you more.
Yeah. And that's what I've actually found with children who so a lot of parents will say, you can tell me anything. And then when they tell them something, they say, oh God, I didn't, and they have a bit of a meltdown. And actually, I was talking with a professional today about this, that we ask them to do the very thing that we then punish them for. And I can give you an example of this as an adult, that I received a phone call the other day from a company that said it was my bank. And I said, that's great, but there's no number on my telephone. How do I know who you say you are? And they said, well, we can't prove that. And I said, well, in that case, I'm not going to talk to you. And they said, but we are the bank. And I said, I understand that. We need to talk to you about some fraudulent activity that we think is happening on your bank account. And I said, I'm not prepared to talk to you about it. So this conversation went backwards and forwards for a few minutes. And the gentleman on the end of the phone got really cross with me. And he said, right, well, in that case, we're just going to lock your bank, your account. And I said, you do that, because I will then know that you were definitely the bank talking to me, and I'll have to ring you. And I had to ring them, and I spent 2.5 hours on the phone to get through to the department that said, why wouldn't you answer the questions? And I said, you send me cybersecurity emails, You send me text messages to confirm that I've done something within my account. I said, and when I've questioned you, you've got really cross at me. And they went, well, yeah, because we phoned. And I said, I had no way of knowing who you were. And they said, well, what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have to do this, this, and that. And it was so interesting that that's the experience children get. They get taught, be cyber aware, be, you know, if somebody contacts you, come and tell us. And the young child will go, this really strange person contacted me on Facebook or on my gaming. And the parent kind of goes, right, that's it, you're off the game. So what does happen is because of the response children receive, they learn to adapt with what they think they should say to their parents and what they shouldn't. And you know, that makes it very difficult to have conversations about your feelings. It makes it very difficult to have a conversation about your mental health. It
Absolutely.
makes it very difficult. Yeah. And this is why I think sometimes it is difficult for young people to converse with their parents.
So how do you reduce that friction?
I usually educate the parents. So that's my privilege. I get to do that in therapy. I educate teachers, I educate social workers, police, solicitors, basically anybody who's working with in and around children. What I'm trying to do is do an education about, okay, you need to ask these questions. This is what you need to listen for. And you need to be compassionate, patient, and stoic, because no matter what they tell you, your job, if you like, your job is to be absolutely over the moon they had the courage to do so. And unfortunately, parents get scared and they react. And that's, again, one of these things that in therapy language, we call it emotional regulation. And children are not very good at it. And guess what? Neither are many parents. So I suppose, Monsieur, on this conversation, this is also why I've written the book, because there's the first section is about the theory, about what happens when technology is in and around. So I talk about technology being in and around very small children and how they perceive their relationship with their parents. I talk about the way that trauma has an impact and what that can do in terms of child development and the way they see the world. And then the second section, I'm talking about gaming. But what I'm actually doing is I'm saying, okay, you walk into your child's bedroom and they've got a headset on, or they've got earpods in, or whatever it is they're doing. You can't see what might be something like 80 other players. And it doesn't seem to register in a parent's or an adult's mind the same way it would if they went to go and collect their child from a netball match or a cricket match or a football match, because we've been around sport for so long that we understand, let's just go with football for a second, that there's 11 players on either side. The game runs for 45 minutes and then they cross over. There's a break in the middle. Normally they have, I think in schools, they get oranges and that's essentially a football match, and adults understand that. The adults of today didn't play computer games, so they don't have a cognitive representation of what a computer game is. They know that it's a computer game, they can see it on the screen, but because they haven't experienced it, or most of them haven't experienced being on on what they call a death team match, or, you know, if they're playing Fortnite or Minecraft or Roblox or whatever the newest popular game is, because they don't have an experience of that, they don't understand how to converse with a child. So I will teach the parents and I'll say, you have to find out what kind of game they're playing. So are they playing a game that's time limited? In which case, if you walk in 2 minutes before the end of a match and you turn the computer off, they're going to get angry. If they are near a save point and you walk in and you turn it off, they're going to get angry. So what you need to do is find out, is it time-based? Is it level and skill-based? Is it something where they're in communication and they're part of a team? because if you now pluck that player off, you have literally taken a player off the football field, and that team is now disadvantaged. And that then leaves that child at risk of being bullied, teased, rejected, and all of the other things that go with, you know, peer relationships. I've also explained something that you alluded to earlier, which is that social justice issue. Not everybody has the latest console. Not everybody has the fastest internet connection. And for children and yourself, or even adults who are in underdeveloped countries, you will not have the same high-speed internet as somebody from a very affluent country who's able to go into the game and is now berating and teasing and bullying you because you're not keeping up with the rest of the team. So I've kind of tried to explain it to, well, it'll be professionals that read it and parents that read it, to these adults. This is why your child, your adolescent, your partner may well be shouting at the television or the other monitor, because there's frustrations. People cheat in games, people bully each other in games. There's a lot of camaraderie, but there's lots of things that you need to understand about gaming as a whole. So I've basically explained the rules of gaming. And then the last chapter in the book is I've explained the rules of social media and why people can get so distressed at, you know, putting a post up or something happening to them on a particular website, and why they're looking for particular likes and contacts and conversation. So I'm essentially doing what all of those football books and cricket books and sports books did for me as a child and parent as I was growing up. So there are some sports I don't understand. But if my child was taking part in it, I would read around the sport. And in 2021, it's very difficult for me to really get parents to think about gaming and social media in the same way. I know I veered off slightly, and I veered off slightly there about, you know, how do we get people to talk to each other? Well, I think it's the adult's responsibility to learn and then to pass that education on. We do it in stories. This is what the human species has done for millennia. And yet the one story we're not passing down is this is what feelings are. This is what mental health is. This is how you talk to somebody if you don't feel your very best.
Like, even from my personal experience, I do watch a lot of cricket, and even when my country is playing, and you know, the whole, you know, I can feel the buzz around because everyone is watching the match. And you know, I try to involve my mom, and she's like, and some people, as you said, the adults need to, you know, learn and understand. But some people, I think they're not even willing to understand and learn, because what they feel like, you know, you're a kid, you do not know anything about the world, you do not have any experience, you don't understand how the world works, you don't understand the complications. Maybe that's true, but what they do is they outright deny the feelings that the kid is having, the thoughts that they're having, and you know, and at the end of the day, the kid starts to feel lonely, because you know, and they might even fall into wrong companionship. Maybe they can get into, for getting the relief, maybe they can get into some kind of addiction, or you know, some bad friends who might have a bad influence on them. And later on, what happens is that the society and the parents blame the kid themselves instead of the whole, you know, structure. So what about the people who are not willing to learn, who are arrogant, and how can children who are born with mentality of such parents can get rid of them? How can they get out of it?
What a fantastic question. And I wish I had a magic wand to make the to make the resistant parents less resistant. I do tend to say to parents, yes, I know it can be boring. I absolutely know. I would sit and watch my children playing computer games when they were younger, because well, number one, I introduced them to the computers. They're now in their mid-20s. So I always took an interest in the sci-fi games, the first-person shooters, the MMORPGs, and I just had an interest anyway, because I'm that kind of parent, but also I have a passion and interest in technology. So more often than not, the conversations would be, well, who's that? How do you know that person's that? And what I did was I watched my children on a particular platform a long time ago, and it was used by perpetrators of crimes against children. And these little codes kept coming up. So I'd constantly say, what does that mean? Who's that? How do you know that? To the point that I suppose I got the opposite end, where my children would be, oh my God, this is happening on the internet. So they would literally show me nearly everything, which is why I know what a lot of the children have been looking at, because they'd be talking to me about what their peers were doing. And one of the things is, if you're being told by a child, so I'm just going to go with a child who might have a learning difficulty, or a child with who's autistic. They come to see me for therapy once a week. That's generally how it works. And in that hour, they can tell me the same thing that they did the week before. And they can tell me the same thing that they did the week before and the week before and the week before. My job as a therapist is to listen as though it's the first time they're ever telling me. Now, I know that is very difficult for parents when they're busy, because children will pick times that are inconvenient. So I think you were on about this earlier, that they might be busy. And there is this thing about learning, and this is why I talk about patience, because if your child comes in to talk to you about the snail in the garden, Minecraft, cricket, whatever it is, it's our job to make them feel heard and seen and part of the family. Not what you're kind of suggesting is the parents that say you don't have that sensation, you don't have that feeling, you're not thinking that. And unfortunately, we do have a long way to go in terms of adults understanding child development. We make assumptions all of the time that we know best, and you're correct, they do make assumptions that these little people don't know anything about the world, and actually they are the wisest scientists. And there's also something about, and those patterns are often passed down by families who are not given those skills when they're little. And in the United Kingdom, a long time ago, we had something called Sure Start centres, and they would help new parents, particularly the under fives, with, you know, learning how to do things with young children. They'd hold community centre gatherings, and people would go and talk about, you know, my baby stays awake all night. Oh, it's not just me, it's you. But years and years and years ago, when I was at school, not that many, I'm trying not to make myself sound too old. When I was at secondary school, I remember some of the classes were child development, and they used to have babies, and the girls who took the course, funnily enough, mostly girls, they would learn how to put a nappy on, how to burp a baby, what a baby needed, things to do. And yet these skills have gone out of the education system. So I think that the answer sort of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The education of our adults has to start at an earlier age. And for me, I always say, go back to the infancy, go back to the toddlerhood, because that's where we create the next cohort of adults. And there is something to be said about, there will always be parents and adults who think they know best, who think they have a way of parenting that's way beyond everybody else. And we know, I think it's from the education sector, that there's like 4 different types of parenting. There's the liberal, couldn't give a hoot, all the way through to the authoritarian, I know best, don't answer me back, be quiet, don't do this, don't do that, don't talk to me about what you're doing. And I will say, I had parents that were more on that end of the scale, which meant that it was very difficult for me to do this as a child, which is probably why I've gone into this job, because I want to be able to facilitate that this doesn't happen for other children. And yet every every week I'm confronted with a new parent that doesn't want to listen to their child's, you know, new Minecraft village story, or doesn't want to listen to the new skin that they've got on their new Fortnite avatar, and has no interest whatsoever in whether, you know, little Billy down the road likes cricket and little Tommy up the road likes rugby. And that's very difficult, because that says to me that their childhoods also had an element of parents who didn't want to know. And we have teachers who are stressed, social workers who are stressed, police who are stressed, parents who are stressed. I think as a species, we're not doing particularly great at managing our own emotions and those of our children.
From a child's perspective, there are also many things which parents are interested about, but the child or the children themselves do not have an idea. Or there are many things, for example, advices which parents want the children to understand, but they seem to get no clue about. Just like how parents do not understand gaming, or you know, how social media or other aspects. So I think these things, you know, and both parties blame each other. Like, you do not understand that. Oh, you do not understand this. And sometimes even as young people, you get that, you know, inner voice inside you that, oh, they do not know how this thing works, especially when it's something related to technology. And I think that's pulling the poles apart, right?
Yeah.
Because that party is telling that you do not understand this, and this party is telling that you do not understand that. And both of them are very crucial part, you know, because parents normally tend to say things which are realistic, which is, you know, because they want the children to have a bright future. And, you know, when the children do not understand that sometimes, but when children, and same happens, the opposite thing happens as well. For example, when the child tries to express their feeling, and they get rejected or something like that, or they feel that their parents are not listening to them, they automatically have that filter that the next time they want to say something, they might feel like, oh, the last time I approached them, I got rejected. So there is no point in, you know, going or talking with them. They're busy, or they do not understand me. They do not understand this meme, or they do not understand my way of communication. And this, you know, this little gap of communication, I think, is pulling the poles apart. So how do you, you know, reduce that gap and bring them close together? Because the relationship of parents and children are one of the most beautiful things. And I think this is one of the aspects which is, you know, even though they love each other, even though they respect each other, there's something, you know, empty within that relationship, because any relationship is based on communication. And when there is lack of proper communication, I think that's when, you know, moral things like respect, or, you know, trying the feelings which you have for each other decrease. Even though, you know, they're the parents, they take care of children, and children also love them, there is that, you know, feeling that, you know, they are taking care of us, and I love them a lot. But, you know, that sometimes people or children do not have the deep connection. So I think that's what's lacking in many parents to children relationship. So, you know, how do you reduce that?
So I could only say that I can only help those on that deep understanding level. I only get to do that with my clients. So, you know, the best that I can do with the book, or when I'm teaching, so I teach therapists lots of different things, you know, about technology, and what I'm able to do in maybe a day's training is give them what I call a little bit of me, so that they can learn what it is that I do. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. What I say is, in this circumstance, this is what the child needs you to do. This is how the child needs to be seen and soothed and safe and secure. So what they're looking for is this, this, and this. But I'm very, very privileged in my role as a child therapist that my job is to help the child start to talk to the parent and to communicate, and for the parent to be able to listen and communicate back. So just thinking about when you were saying that there, it is the most beautiful thing. Children come into the practice with their parents, and it'll be a case of the parent will say, so do you want to talk to Kath? No, you tell him, you tell him. And I go, okay, when he or she can talk, or they can talk to me in a way that they're happy with, then, you know, I'll say that there's good communication between me and the child. But here's what I do as a job. When the parent leaves, it's me and the child. So I tend to, you know, we'll play a game, we explore stuff. And then I will say things like, do you think we should tell mommy, daddy, or parent, carer, whoever it is that's there, do you think we should tell them about X, Y, Z that we've done today? And it might be just a little prompt about how well they did at something, or what they learned about themselves, or something like that, so that they can. And what often happens is when the child is not ready, they say things like, no, you tell them, Kath. And I go, okay, when you are courageous enough and can tell mummy, daddy, parent, carer, uncle, whoever it is that's coming to pick you up, when you can tell them and you rush out of the door to say, this is what I did today, this is what I did, and I did this, and I learned this, and I learned that, my job is done. Because essentially the moment the child and the parents start to communicate, that rift is already being healed. And I don't work with children alone. So there's a lot of psychotherapy models that will work with just the child. I often talk about, if they were a gardener and the plant was dying in the garden, would they just keep watering the plant? No, they'd move the plant, they'd repot it, they would add fertilizer, they'd read around whatever they needed to do to make the plant bloom and come alive. And of course, one of the things I'm there to do is help that communication channel between parent, child. And I do that by talking to the parents as well, saying, do you remember what it was like to be this little? And what I see in, I don't know, little Lucy is she's really struggling to talk to you. So when she starts saying mummy, 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 or daddy, 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 you might need to say to her, what's a good time for us to talk this evening? And, you know, it's giving them tools, because many of the parents that I speak to are totally unaware of how children communicate. They're also unaware of their own impediments towards talking to their children as well. So I don't critique their parenting. I say, have you ever thought of doing it this way? Did you know that neuroscience tells us? And I give them information so that they become more informed. And I think there's certainly a whole cohort. I do give a lot of my parents things to read. I will say, go and have a look at this author, go and have a look at this author. And one particular person I tend to drive them towards is somebody called Dan Siegel, because Dan Siegel is, let's call him the grandfather of something called interpersonal neurobiology. And it's a massive discipline of biology, psychology, chemistry, even maths, physics, you know, the whole lot, social development, moral development. And it's all about, this is what's going on in a child's brain as they develop, and here's what probably happened for you. So if we can give you the tools to almost heal your childhood history, you can now facilitate supporting your own children in their growth and development. So a lot of the time, the way that I get to do that, Monsieur, is through my own practice. And that means that I'm limited to the number of people that I will ever see. So for my career, I will only ever see a limited number of people. But what I can do through education in terms of the books and teaching is give parents some of what I think we need. And by the we need, I'm talking about myself as a parent here as well. When my children were younger, I needed somebody to say, you're doing a really good job. It might not be the best in the world, but you're doing the best that you can. You need compassion, you need understanding, And you need to know that you can do it differently, and that doing it differently doesn't make you a bad parent previously because you did something, because we've all got faults and flaws. And, you know, we pass down. I used to say to my children, I tried my very hardest not to pass down any trauma, any stress, and I didn't do a great job of it at all. You know, and they do laugh now and say, you know, well, I mean, do you remember that time you were a crap parent? And I'm like, I'm always a crap parent. I never claimed to be anything other than a crap parent. But there's something about the humor that we have is I've always tried to do my best by them. And sometimes I probably didn't say the most helpful things. And I understand, and I do say this to them, you know, I did get it wrong in air quotes, but I also put a lot of time and effort into trying to make up for when I got it right. And I can see that there was something that I could have done better. And that takes a lot of skill. Being self-compassionate is the hardest thing for any of us to do. We're not good at it at all as human beings.
These kind of conversations actually helps the child to understand what the parent is going through, and also the parents about the child's mentality, like what they think about the parents, and what's their idea about their parents and what's going on inside their head. Sadly, and sometimes many people do not have these kind of conversations, you know, because there's this thing you call courage. Because as you're talking about it, and this clicked in my mind, because why there will be something related to courage when you are just trying to express your feelings to your parents? And whenever there's something called courage, and what you're trying to do is talk with your parents, logically it feels like there's something wrong here. Because you're not talking with your enemy, or you are not doing anything risky, whatever. I mean, at that point, you know, it might sound risky that, oh, I don't know how my parents will react. But if you look at it from a larger point of view, it should not be that much risky. And that's what that caught my attention when you said that, whether they have the courage to tell that to your parents. And I think that it should be gone. This concept of, you know, courage for being able to express yourself to your parents is bad. Because, for example, a child does something wrong, okay? They get into something wrong maybe, and if their thinking is that my parents is going to, you know, screw me up right now, what they're going to do is they're logically going to hide that from the parents, and they might keep on doing that in the longer future. And suddenly, when the parents catch their children doing that, they will, you know, burst into emotions like, hey, why didn't you tell this to me? I told you, as I mentioned before, I told you that, you know, share everything with me. But at the back of the mind, the child had that feeling that if I told this to my parents, they would have screwed me up. They would have, you know, applied harsh punishments on me. They would have applied, you know, harsh things on me. But on the flip side, if there was no such thing called courage, or having the courage to speak up to your parents, you know, what the parents could have done, that is that they could have, you know, detected that problem at the very beginning. They could have, you know, talked about that problem with that child or with the children, and they could have ended that at the very beginning. Whereas in the previous situation, the problem has already gotten really big, and they cannot, and sometimes they might even lose their children to death or something like that, if it becomes something very serious.
Yeah, and for me, the biggest feeling that I see in those situations is shame. So when I'm talking about
Mm-hmm.
courage, I'm talking about a child who, and I'm going to refer to it as the uh-oh feeling. So they tend to walk towards that, you know, oh, I've got to tell my parent I didn't. Uh-oh, what will they say or do? And of course, lots and lots of that feeling is around shame, that it's gonna be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
That often comes from before the age of 3. So one of the things we know is that before the age of 3 we have something called non-verbal memory, and it's a feeling, not a cognition. It's not a thinking, and it's the same feeling that you have when you're under the age of 3. And that feeling you can actually see with people who have dogs. So I have dogs, and one of the things that's really quite interesting is you, I don't know, you come downstairs, and they've made a mess in the kitchen or made a mess on the floor. The first thing that many of us do is tut, roll our eyes, or we go, oh, what did you do? Yeah. So dogs are very similar in terms of the brain structure that does this. It's that particular brain structure that says, I'm going to be rejected from the pack. I'm going to die. And it's an instantaneous feeling. And we call that shame, right? And there's a difference of, I need to tell my parents something which is embarrassing, which is, oh, God, I left my bag on the bus. Yeah. Something very simple, versus I hit my friend at school and now I'm in trouble and I've got to write an essay and I've got a detention. Because that we would put usually around the feeling of guilt. So embarrassment and guilt are much easier to deal with because you can make amends for them. You can do something differently. You know, you can, I don't know, chase the bus, or you can get your parents to ring the company and say, can you check for the back? You know, there's something that you can do to rectify it. The feeling of, I am bad, is shame. And of course, parents don't always realize they're doing this. So this is one of the conversations I have with my parents in the therapy room, and you know, particularly when they come in as adults, actually. And I say, so what happened when you were small if something got spilt? You know, maybe you spilt a cup of tea, or you knocked a bowl on the floor, or I don't know, you tripped over something. What used to happen? And usually the parents' reaction, which is one of, oh my God, there's a disaster, versus you could have hurt yourself, generally comes across as anger to the child. Now, the thing is, the parent may not be angry. They may have done something with their bodily posture, their voice, or indeed all the way through to being very angry. And children then begin to associate that look, that sound, that sensation that's happening right here and now. It's something I did. Because under the age of about 5, children don't understand that parents might be having a hard time from work, and I just happened to do something that was slightly irritating, and they shouted at me, not because they're angry at me, but because they're angry at their boss. A child will make an assumption, that's because of me, I'm bad. So when it comes to even making, you know, let's take that example of I thumped one of my friends at school, and now I've got to stay in detention, or whatever it is that they do, isolation or whatever it is they call it now, because each school has its own policy. That child is going to feel like, I don't know what I can do to make amends, because they don't have the cognition to think that way. What goes through their mind in that moment is, oh boy, I've got to go and say, I just did this. And it's not easy. So you can imagine that something very trivial, I've lost my pen, all the way through to I've been on a website that's just taken, in fact, I can give you an example of this. My youngest son, when he was 9, was on a Xbox game, and somebody said, oh, I've got a code. And he said, okay, I'll buy the code off you, and gave him some of his the points that he'd got anyway in the background. And this code actually locked my child out of his Xbox account. Okay. So I gets an email that said, due to whatever, some sort of activity on the account of, we've now basically booted him off the Xbox Live system under this account. And being a rational parent and one who teaches people not to do this and has had this conversation with her son on number of occasions, I still walked into his bedroom and went, what the hell have you done? Why have I just got an... So I reacted just like the parents I'm talking about, because in that moment, I was angry. I was angry that he'd done something fraudulent, whatever it was that Microsoft Xbox had emailed me about. And what he'd done is he had been tricked by what he thought was one of his peers to buy this code. And this code was basically a code that was illegal on the Xbox system. So what that resulted in was we then had to create a brand new Xbox account. You know, big deal. In the grand scheme of things, all we had to do was create a different account for him. Not a big problem. But in the moment, of course, I made assumptions about people's thinking about what kind of parent I was. She teaches about cybersecurity. She teaches all about online safety. Look what her children do. I'd already gone to that place in my own head. So I was thinking I was bad. I was now angry with my son. I then went into my son's room to shout at him. He then went, not going to tell you anything anymore, because what he saw was, if I tell her something, she's going to be angry. If I lie about something, she's going to be angry. If I tell the truth, she's going to be angry. So he made a decision at that point in time. This was kind of the conversation that we had. He decided he wasn't going to tell me anything. That's not how it went out, because obviously I went back in and went, hey, I didn't get that great, did I? I shouted because I was angry, because it wasn't great. It wasn't great in terms of parenting. So there is an understanding, I suppose, that this is why children feel like that, is because sometimes as parents, we just flip. And whilst that's not okay, it does mean that we're human and we do have these flaws. And then this is where that discord happens between parent and child.
We are all humans, and it's,
Yeah.
it's okay to make mistakes. But sometimes what I feel bad about is that even though if parents sometimes behave very rudely, they do not even say sorry. They feel like, why should I say sorry? Because I am the adult person. I take care of everything. I do everything. And, it doesn't matter anymore. But sometimes I feel like from a child's perspective, and when the child knows that what their parents has done is wrong, and I don't think it's wrong to expect a sorry from their mother or father, because they have done a mistake, and it's okay to do a mistake, but it's not okay to not acknowledge the mistake they have done and say that, oh, I do not need to fix anything because I'm the adult one.
Yeah, and that for me is the hardest thing to have a conversation with parents, because more often than not they do say that in the therapy. Well, I'm not saying sorry, Kath. And I try with compassion and earnest to say, it's your responsibility to model being sorry, because what does happen is when you do something, you say to your child, right now, say sorry to the little girl you thumped, or the boys who you took the sweeties from. Go and say sorry. That child will go, I've never had it modeled, and because they're angry, they go sorry, and the parent goes, right, don't do it again. And I'm like, okay, imagine what it feels like to have somebody truly say, I really didn't get that. I didn't get that spot on. That was not a great move by me. I apologize for the hurt that I've caused. And, I apologize and have apologized, and will probably still apologize to my children for a long, long time, because I'm not perfect. And I do say things, and I'm apologizing for the hurt that I caused. And that's what the apology is about. And this is what I try to explain to the parents. It's not about saying sorry because it's not a game. It's not one-upmanship, and you don't have to win at parenting. It's not something you level up on. Great, I've just done 3, you know. It's something that's about, this is how I model real personal connection. And the way that I do that is when I recognize I've hurt you, I say I'm sorry for that.
From my personal experience, what I've realized is that it's really hard to acknowledge your mistake, and it's really hard to even realize that you've done a mistake, and it's even harder to put all your feelings and maybe some ego down and say that I'm sorry. But from even, I think even if it's hard, there should be this practice of saying sorry, because I think many people do not say sorry, especially parents, to the children, because they might think that that's going to decrease their value, or that's going to that's going to put them lower from the higher rank they have in the family, or the reputation of being firm and being able to take care of the family, that reputation goes down, because I still feel that people often associate the word or the feeling of being sorry with weakness, and and I think that's not true, because I think if you say sorry, I think it's going to increase the quality of the relationship. But if you are just arrogant, and if you don't admit your mistake, probably you're internally feeling guilty, right? But if you do not express it, the other person is going to think that, oh, they do not even feel guilty about it. And that's going to increase the difference, which was not supposed to exist.
Absolutely. The lack of an apology increases the distance of connection. And what I do find, so psychology talks about, we have something called a locus of control. When circumstances in front of us are, as they are, who do we actually apportion the blame to? Do we go, the reason that has happened, whatever it is, the reason, the bus is late is because I did something and, it's my fault. Well, no. Most of us will go, it's the bus company's fault, and we do what's called externalizing. So we make the blame sit with the other party. And for some children, it's intolerable to think that they are at fault for some reason. Other children take that blame, and quite often people who present with depression often have this internal locus of control where they go, everything's my fault. The reason I don't have a very good job is my fault. The reason I'm not getting the promotion is my fault. Whereas actually it might be because there's no spaces in the promotion hierarchy. And yet those circumstances are interpreted by the individual as something that's my doing. So again, going back to that kind of adult-child relationship, if there are children who are brought up in families where the finger is pointed and you're to blame, why did you do that? Why did you hit your brother? Can't you see how he now feels because of you? That what you'll see in those circumstances is children will make a decision that either go, screw you, everything's your fault because and they do the locus of control, which is externalizing, or they internalize. And it's often quoted in books and so on, and some of the literature, that girls internalize and boys externalize. I don't necessarily see that, because many of the people I have seen in my practice in the last decade, particularly around social media, gaming, whatever it is, males internalize for certain. And it for me, it's about what kind of environment, what early experience did they have, and seeing parents who will say things like, oh, don't be stupid, why did you do that, what it's your fault that, and that child then learns to go, oh, it must be true, it must be my fault. And of course I didn't get the A on my exam because, or I didn't get the star, or I didn't get the whatever it is, because of something I did wrong. And it's just brought up in my mind at the minute. We have in a lot of the primary schools in this country certificates for 100% attendance. So children who are there every single day. Yeah. This is one of those circumstances where society does this and teaches children. So there have been children who have poorly parents. There have been children who have siblings who have been ill. There are children who have, been ill themselves. They don't get one of these certificates. And more often than not, those children will start to make a belief about the reason I haven't got 100% attendance is because of something I did because I was poorly. Therefore, I am to blame for not being 100%. And I think sometimes the education system don't really consider what the long-term impact of these kind of interventions are, such as, let's have all of the children come in front of each other, talk about how they're feeling today, rather than the smaller groups or the one-on-one conversations. It's humiliation, shame, rejection, and those feelings are intolerable. The last thing we want to feel as a human being, and kind of we're going back a bit to the conversation earlier, is isolated and alone.
I think the education system needs to break down itself, conduct some research for finding out the best way to educate people in the ways which are necessary, in the aspects which are necessary, and then reconstruct itself, because I see a lot of flaws in the education system, and I feel like it's not built for the future which we are planning to have.
Yes. Yeah. It's often said that the education system is still built around the 1900 education model, which was to produce factory workers. Well, we're not really producing many factories nowadays that require human beings to do the work. We're actually producing a technological society which requires humans to do the human work. So of course it needs to change. It's 2021, 120 years of doing the same thing, and we're wondering why there's and this goes really back to right at the very beginning about mental health and technology and young people and depression. Well, we're setting them up for failure, and by that I mean we're creating systems where, I see children in my practice that are absolutely wonderful at creative, thinking out of the box, different ways of seeing the world, but they have to do maths, English, religious studies, chemistry, science, biology. And, they might want to be a hairdresser. They might want to be a construction worker. They might want to be, and of course, we need to have diversity and we need to have specialisms, and the education system is set up for generalism. And that's the issue for me, is that the education system really keeps churning out generalists. And I'm very privileged. I am a specialist, and I stuck to my, if you like, I've pretty much stuck to my guns, as they say, because I didn't want to do generalist. I like reading generalist and I like generalist learning, but that's not me as an individual doing a job. So I'm quite a specialist, and it's one of the things I've supported my children in doing. They have the two boys have very different careers in terms of what they're doing, and as long as they are happy, I could not give a hoot whether they've got pieces of paper. I mean, they do, but I couldn't give a hoot whether they've got pieces of paper that proves to one person in a role that on one day out of a 5-year period, they managed to read and regurgitate the words, because that's what exams are, and for me, that it's why I sit with young people who have failed their exams, saying it is not the end of the world. I completely had a 180-degree turn in my late 20s when I changed over to psychotherapy and psychology. But what I bring now is that previous learning. But you can go to college, you can retrain. Given that there's so much knowledge on the internet now, realistically, what does a piece of paper with? I'm probably not going to be helping any of the young people's approaches to careers here. But I am going to say, what does it really matter that you have a piece of paper that says on this particular day, you could answer the questions that we answered, we asked you about a topic. What does that tell me about what kind of person you are? What does that tell me about your ability to get along in groups and, work with other people as a team? And it tells me nothing. So I think this is why, we need more Elon Musk type questionnaires where people go, they go into an interview and they're asked absolute questions that make no sense to them whatsoever. Because, people are far more than just their education certificate. Because at the end of the day, I do see a lot of the children that I work with don't learn in that, in that rote way. They can learn a topic, they just can't write about it. They can learn a topic, but they're not very good at putting their prose together or answering it in the way that the examiners expect. So, that's where I would certainly say there's a psychologist called Scott Barry Kaufman, and he looks at creativity, intelligence. He now looks more at post-traumatic growth and being human. He's very much into humanistic psychology, and for me, that's the approach and place I come from. Is human beings are much more complicated than these dopamine hits they're supposed to be addicted to with technology. You're much more complicated than just your early life experiences, because at some point you leave childhood and you start to make your own way. I think this is where I'm seeing that there's so much we could do here, Masha. So, in terms of all of the questions that you've asked so far, it's like I think we've gone quite in depth as well in terms of some of the conversations, but I think it's always all about human connection, relationships, and the fact that we're complex. We have a history, even if it's 5 years, 15 years, or 55 years, there's a history behind every single thing that we do.
I think, like, in terms of education system and even the way the parents teach us, they just teach us what's already there. They do not teach us to ask questions like, why is it this? Why is the formula of circle pi r square? They just memorize it for the rest of their lives. And what I feel like is that it reduces the depth of knowledge. They just know it on the surface level, but they do not know what it is actually about. And so when it comes to working for people who actually ask why things work in a certain way, they feel that there's a difference, because they're not familiar with that kind of mentality, and they do not have that in-depth knowledge about why things work the way it works. And I think the hunger of it's important to have the hunger of knowledge in order to develop your mentality and in order to get to know things in general. Because and how much can school teach you? Knowledge is really vast, and there's only a certain portion of things which school can teach you. Maybe school can teach you the basics. School can teach you the basics of mathematics, and school can teach you the basics of language through which you can communicate with people. But in order to develop yourself, you need to have that hunger. You need to have that will for exploring things and learning about new things. And parents also play a crucial role here, because they normally go for safer options, and I'm not telling it's very bad to go for safer options, but what I feel like they do is, when they choose the safer options, they choose the more general things, which does not promote questioning, which does not promote to go deep into things. And when you're trying to build futuristic projects, like Elon Musk is trying to build reusable rockets, it's very hard to apply that generalistic knowledge when you're trying to make something which does not exist. Imagine if Elon Musk did not go deep into rocket science, he would not have been able to make reusable rockets with his team. He would have just accepted the way it is. It will be the way it is.
Yes.
And just by asking questions as to why things work the way it works, he managed to reduce the cost of rockets drastically, and which is why people can dream big of space events and space tourism and going to Mars. And if people have that mentality of asking why and how it happens and why it happens, I think it's going to open a lot of spectrums, and exploration is going to be really fun.
Yeah, I must admit, one of the things I get excited about is that question, why? So and as I was talking earlier, I think I might have said, the reason I've written the book is the why. It's not the what, it's not the how, it's the why. So why do children do that? Well, children do that because, and I have certainly brought my children up to question everything, to take things to pieces, to work out how to put them back together, much to the financial cost that I will say it's probably cost me over the years. But there's an element of excitement. And I think, I might have said it earlier, children are the wisest scientists. And I think if you watch or listen to any of the podcasts where, so I'm thinking here, the technologists, so I think Sam Harris and maybe Joe Rogan, they've all had Neil deGrasse Tyson on.
Yeah.
And
exactly,
he
I was
often
thinking
talks
about
children. Yeah, children are, and I love it when he goes,
he said
they
that
are the
children
living
are born
scientists. Why this,
scientists.
why that, why the other. It's the question that gets asked all of the time in my therapy room. What is this, Kath? And I'll say, well, what do you think it is? Well, what does it do? Well, what do you think it does? Why does it do that? And I say, now that's a question we can both come to an answer with, because the why is the bit about a conversation. The how is me telling them something. The what is me telling them something. That's not real knowledge. Why is let's discover it together. So, they might say, well, why does this make brown? And I go, I don't know. Why don't we try and make some other colours and then see what happens? And so in paint or in painting, even, one of the things I enjoy the most is the scientists come in and they say, I'm going to paint a picture of, and I say, okay. And then they get the paint out and they start mixing. And for 45 minutes, they might be mixing colours. That for me is the best part about that we never get round to putting it on the paper, because they're experimenting and they'll say, well, what might happen if I do this? And I say, I don't know. Well, let's try it. Why do you want to put that colour in with that colour? Well, because I'm interested to see what happens. Okay, let's give it a go. And everything is all about, whoa, look at what happened. That was great. Or we didn't expect that. Or, oh dear, that didn't turn out like we expected. So we're dealing with a myriad of feelings, experiences. And for me, there's something about this is what children do best. I love working with the under fives for that reason, because everything is why. And, for 45 minutes, they're the questions that I'm answering. And I don't ever get to answer them fully, because I'm also okay, and this is a bit like the sorry thing, saying I don't know. Because I've noticed that parents struggle with that one as well. They struggle to say, I don't know. And it's one of the things I've modeled. It's one of the things I've certainly modeled for or throughout COVID, is that when can we? I don't know, because Boris is doing the best that he can. This is obviously for children in this country, because most of them know that Boris is the one who said they can't go to school. Boris is the one who says they can. So we have this conversation and I say, so, you know, Boris has got lots of people telling him lots of different things and he's got to try and make a decision. And when he makes a decision, sometimes it's the right one and sometimes it's not. And sometimes he's guessing and sometimes he's not. And we have to think about trusting him, which is, you know, very difficult in terms of politicians and government. We have to think about trusting him because he's the one that's getting told all the information from the people at the top, and they're the ones asking the why questions. So, you know, even in politics, there's science and there's questioning and you know, I think that, I mean, again, that's another fantastic way of parents really connecting with their children, is getting in touch with that why. And I know it can feel like it goes on for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. But doesn't that just show you the amount of interest and intrigue a child has with their world?
Not only asking why and how increases knowledge, I think it also, you know, deepens a relationship, any kind of relationship it is. It can be in a parent's relationship, romantic relationship, friendship. For example, if someone is telling you that I'm feeling sad, and if you ask, like, why are you feeling sad? And that person might be able to open up with you. And so you might have a very good conversation, and that might even build a trust. And if something wrong happens in the future, you can take their help without having any hesitation. And I think this is why it's important to ask why and how, and get to the root of things as to how the things work.
Yeah, and that goes for, you know, I'm just thinking about the engineering science side of things, you know, why and how, but isn't that just the nitty-gritty of what we are as humans? Why does that work in that person but not in that person? Why do I feel this when I'm near this person but not that person? What's going on between me and you here? And what and it's all of those questions that increase knowledge. That knowledge sharing is the thing that's what deep connection's about, is knowledge sharing, rather than that peripheral. I'm just thinking about what's the word I want here. So in transaction analysis, we call this past timing. So it's very superficial. How's the weather? It's fun. That's not deep connection. Deep connection is, I really want to know who you are, what's going on inside, why you think that way, when you think that way, what makes you, you know, what makes you tick. That's real intimacy in terms of conversations. And that's where children originate from. They just want to know, because they're interested in that anything that brings me closer to you and helps me understand you as my caregiver is the thing that helps me feel safe. And of course, once children start with the why, parents will often answer with an education-based statement, which is, because I said so. And isn't that just a complete shutdown on the conversation? You know, because I said so, because I'm the grown-up. That's another one. And it's so difficult because that doesn't make sense. And you know, to quote Neil deGrasse, he talks about, and that's what extinguishes the fire of Inquisition. I'm sure he says something like that, but if not, I'll just say it was me that made it up. But it is that one sentence that just ends abruptly, that inquisitiveness from children, and it absolutely extinguishes the fire really quickly.
You know, right now I just realized two things. And the first thing is that probably the reason why fake news spreads faster than the original news is that people do not ask the question whether the news is true or not, whether the source is trustworthy or not. They just, you know, share it if they feel like it's true. They do not,
because somebody said so.
Yes, they do not, you know, question the credibility of it.
Yeah.
And the second thing I noticed is that a lot of parents use that quote, like, this is because I said so. And, that's why children grow up with that mentality that their parents is perfect. And when they grow up and they realize, no, that their parents are not perfect, they face the dilemma that whether they should talk about things with them or not. I might be wrong here, but these two things just clicked on my mind right now.
Yeah, I mean, number one, the whole essence of the first book that I brought out and the whole essence of the second one is not only am I educating people in terms of the why, what I'm actually doing is hopefully creating critical thinking, because it's the biggest element of our sharing of knowledge that we do implicitly, is because we are not operating from a critical thinking perspective. And I would say that I think the scientific mind is always thinking critically. It's looking for, I think, I will make statements like, not that I'm a cynical therapist, and I'm joking when I say it, but I'm also not joking, because it's that idea of cynicism, criticism. I look at things and go, okay, who said so? When did they say so? What gives them the authority to make that statement? And I'm often known for saying so children will say, or parents as well, actually, yeah, but it's been proven, Kath. And I go, I'm sorry, but it hasn't. They go, but it has. Science has proven. And I say, sorry, the only thing you can prove is bread. You cannot prove science. You can disprove a theory, but you cannot prove anything ever for certainty. That's the only thing that we have that's absolutely concrete knowledge. We can disprove, but we cannot prove. And of course, this is where we get it the opposite way around, because and we're going to go back to education again, during education, we are told, because I said so. This is how it's written in this book, therefore it's the truth. And there are many truths. There are so many truths. Going back to that history comment that I made earlier, there's the United States history. There's also the British history, the Indian history, right the way across the world. And each one of them will be slightly tailored to the bits they didn't want to put in, because... And
it might be biased as well.
Yes. Well, of course they are, because we know this through AI. Human beings are fallible. We make things up. We lie. We like to just skew the results a little bit, because A, it helps us feel knowledgeable and superior, and B, because it, and makes us feel intelligent, and B, because it then puts us in a place of authority that can't be questioned. And actually, this is what children do all of the time. They question teachers, and they're told, just be quiet, read your book and answer the questions. And it becomes, I think, for a lot of young people, and particularly this is how I certainly felt, is disgruntled. Well, how do I know that this is the truth? Because I said so. Yeah, but how do I know? Because I said so, Kath. Now shut up and get on with your work. That was my educative experience, and it still is today. This is why not only am I like a technologist, I'm also a psychotherapist, I'm a functional health practitioner. I want to learn a lot, and I want to know why that works with that, and why that works with that, and why doesn't that work with that? Because that's the thing about the human being, is we are all really, really complicated. And I don't have the time in my finite life to learn everything there is to know. But you know what? I'm going to learn as much as I can. And that's how I see the knowledge and so on, which is why I suppose I have a very different view to a lot of people in terms of the technology. But certainly when it comes to fake news, misinformation, disinformation, I find those terms are being thrown around as though they're the truth as well. Because this person over here might be sharing information that they believe 100% is the truth, and they don't know that it's a mistruth, or they don't know it's not the truth, or they don't know that it's not the truth that's been proven in this particular way with this supported evidence, because, as I've been saying, you can't prove it. So when people see these words on text, or they're listening to them on videos, they make an assumption. I don't have to put any responsibility into thinking about this. I can just take X person at their word. And you know what? Humans lie. So, you know, this idea of it's disinformation if it's shared by somebody who thinks they're doing it for the right cause, but it's misinformation if it's attributed to somebody who is sharing it on purpose to mislead. And I think, well, actually, we call this fibbing. When children are little, we call it fibbing. Oh, you are such a, you know, you're such a liar tends to have quite a connotation that goes with it that feels, ugh. But fibbing is what children do. It's part of their learning how to be in a society. If I don't quite tell the truth here, am I still accepted in my community? If I tell it in this way, does that absolve me of the responsibility and place it on somebody else? You know. So yeah, it's certainly definitely about conversations, because I laugh actually when I find you know, when somebody says, oh, so this child did this and then they did this, I laugh because I'm like, what a clever young person. They considered, if I do this, then I can do that, and then I might get away with it. And of course, I'm belly laughing, you know, and some of the teachers or social workers are like, you're not going to believe what they've done now. And I go, go on then, tell me. And they say, well, they did this. And I go, brilliant. I love their tenacity. I love their cognitive thinking. I love the way they've considered their actions and then gone for the one that's in their favor the most. Brilliant. You know, it's like children when, so I remember watching this with my nephew. He was told by his dad not to jump off the settee. So he threw himself on the settee and rolled off it. And of course, I burst out laughing and went, brilliant. He did as he was told. He didn't jump off the settee. He found another way to get down that wasn't the way that he was supposed to get. You know, it's just, that's what I like about children, is that there was that thing about, okay, so if I can't do that, what can I do? Lots of other options. And that's how I think we should see life, is there's always lots of other options.
So, you know, people have this, you know, habit of asking why and how when they're children, but society dampens it or destroys it. So how did you, or in your case, how did you keep it alive? Like, how did you keep that hunger for knowledge alive?
I have a rebellious streak. So by rebellious streak, I mean, number one, I've got, even though I've tied it up now, I've got blue hair. I'm covered in tattoos. I do not conform to the standard, you know, physicist, scientist, psychotherapist. One of the things I do for a lot of the parents is, and they'll say, so what do I say to my child? I say, tell them you're going to bring them to see a lady who's got blue hair and loads of tattoos. And they go, I thought you were going to explain about being a therapist. I went, I don't need to. The room does that. The room is laid out, and it's like there's so much stuff for them to see and do. I don't need to tell them what I do as a job. They'll work it out. Tell them I have blue hair and tattoos, because they're going to want to know who I am. They're not interested in the bloody room until they get here, you know. And then when they get there, they go, whoa, you know, there's gaming stuff and sand tray stuff and painting stuff and dolls and Lego and it's brilliant. And that's a case of, you know, the child who wants to know why. But I have always found the authority of, because I said so, the thing that grates on me the most. So as a human being, I'm not satisfied with because I said so. So I think that's possibly why and where the passion comes from. But also, I get so excited when I see, you know, I was just reading, so again, I have a big passion around like Peter Diamandis, Elon Musk, Mary Lou Jepsen. There's a lot of people in technology that are doing amazing things. You know, if Mary Lou Jepsen gets to where she's heading very shortly, the fMRI machine looking for tumours is going to end up the size of a belt that somebody puts around their waist, and they can, you know, it's going to be powered by red light. It's going to be able to transition throughout the whole body. My goodness, how inexpensive will that become? And how many more communities around the world will that help? So this is demonetizing expensive healthcare. I think that the way that we are approaching science is exciting because people do have a passion for it. And I also think that, you know, in the same vein, there will always be a passion for, you know, other people to be excited about art or creative stuff that I do. You know, I will never need to worry about walking into an art gallery and thinking, oh my God, would I ever get my painting up? I'm not a painter. So there's something about, I don't need to put my passion into that area and understand the why over there, because that's not the thing I'm interested in. I'm interested in pretty much an understanding of how things work. So that would be my succinct understanding of why I do what I do. I want to understand how things work. That includes humans, the biology, the technology, engineering. I'm just interested in how everything works, from cosmology all the way down to quantum physics. Not that I'm going to do quantum physics or cosmology, but they are well within my reading paradigm. So I do a lot of reading outside of the psychotherapy, let's say, paradigm. I make sure that outside of my topic of work, I am always reading other different books. So whether it's about, I don't know, biochemistry, I've got books on understanding flow, and even though that does slightly fall under psychology, books on engineering, books on biology, you know. And some of my favorite books at one point were written by the New Scientist, which I just thought were fantastic questions, like, why do bees have knees? You know, just books that have, what was it? Do penguins get cold? Or it was something like, do penguins get cold? And you know, all of those questions that I would have asked as a child. Well, why don't their feet get cold? Of course I know as an adult, but the questions are, well, do bees talk to each other? I know, because there's, you know, bees do it, birds do it. And I used to go, do what? What is it we're talking about here? Please tell me what. And of course, the adults were like, yeah, this is a conversation we're not having with you as a child. You know what I mean? But there was always this thing about why, what is it I don't know? What can I know? What could I learn? What could I do with that knowledge? And I think that's what probably has excited my children throughout their growing up, in terms of they also have this same, you know, oh my God, look at this, this is amazing. We have conversations where we're all over animated, you know, and excited about the new technology, or there's something here that might be able to do that. And we spend a lot of time sharing information via social media, because obviously my children are grown up in that. And we spend a lot of time, you know, where maybe my son's at his work, his partner's at her work, they've got very different jobs, they're sharing information, they're sharing it with me, I'm then counteracting what they're asking, what they're sharing. So it's a constant learning circle.
And I think it's important to surround yourself with people who are continuously seeking for knowledge and looking to improve themselves, because you have a reflection of the environment you live in, of the people you are around with. And and if you're around with people who are demotivated and who does not look forward to improve themselves, I'm not telling to surround yourself with people who are hyper productive or something like that. Of course, you have to have a normal life, but I think it's important to have friends or peers or colleagues who talk about new ideas, who talk about how to improve themselves or to develop themselves, or the thing or the thought which they're having in their mind. Because if you're surrounding yourself with people who are not, you know, looking forward to improve themselves or not seeking knowledge, you're most probably going to remain where you are at the current stage. You are not, probably you might even decrease in terms of your quality and of your brain, because in order to increase your brain's quality, you need to keep it active. And if you do not keep it active, it's going to, get rusts on your brain, as they say sometimes. And if you keep, and if you keep it active, the more active you keep it, the better it gets. I'm not talking about overthinking. That's a negatively.
Well, I mean, I'm partial to a little bit of that every now and then as well, so it's in fact, one of the things that I don't do is that on a night time. I try to make sure that that's the thing that I don't do on a night time. I'll do it during the day, but sleep is sleep, so I am partial to overthinking like everybody else. But also I think there's that thing about some people, and this is just my experience of the humans I've met over the number of years I've been alive, but the thing that I've noticed, Monsieur, is I don't think I'd be happy with stagnant. I don't think I'd be happy with going, okay, that's I'm happy to know this level, because personal development and the way that I see the potential really of my brain is to learn something new every day, and that excites me. But I also know that that's how the brain keeps itself active, if you like, is it's drawn to new and novel stimulation. So I can find it, I'm going to say confusing sometimes, that people don't want to learn. But again, I wonder what happened for them not having that excitement and spark of, oh my God, there is something different every single day in my life. And, whether it's the same walk that I take with the dog, whether it's I don't know, getting in the car. Sometimes I sit in the car and I just think, isn't this fantastic? I do this and I turn the key, and the next thing is I've got a portable thing that goes from here to there, and all I have to do is press these levers. Magnificent. And yet I know that underneath it there's a real complexity of the engine and the axles and the way that the wheels turn and it's fantastic engineering. And then to go all the way to that level of like Elon Musk, never mind about a rocket that can go up, he's building one that can go up and come back down and go up and come back down and go. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
And I think the way the world is progressing, if you do not keep yourself improving, you're going to fall back, because the world is moving from a set education system, set base of knowledge, towards skill-based knowledge, skill-based experiences. And if you do not acquire yourself, especially as a younger person or a middle-aged person who's living in this era, I feel like if you do not keep yourself updated with the new skills related to your field, then you are not going to stay relevant. And if you do not manage to stay relevant, you're not going to be help to any person. And so that might lead you to have an increasing stress, anxiety, because people might feel like you are worthless. And we have such an amazing brain, and we should try to utilize it.
It's one of the reasons why I'm trying to educate therapists, because they're doing a disservice to their clients by not keeping up with the technology and understanding what's going on. So, in terms of, it's great to learn how to sit to talk to somebody. That's great. But I think we do a disservice to our humankind by not moving with the times. I think if we choose to say, no, I'll just stay here, thank you very much, Kath. I don't want to learn about, the technology, and I don't want to learn about pornography use in children and young people, because that's really scary and it's taboo. No, thank you. Then that means that there's a cohort of young people that are being denied something that would be helpful to them because of a lack of wanting and naivete by the therapist. I think they are doing their clients a massive disservice by not learning. But again, I know that I'm doing my clients what's that? A disservice. See, brain fart. I think that's because it's getting late. So there is something about I'm trying to ensure that what I do give my clients is something that will always meet them where they are. And I think that's I do see it that I am privileged because I've come from technology. So, you know, I've been around computers since I was about 11. This world is the one I knew was coming through, and it's going to get faster. It's going to get more complex. It's going to be so much more exciting. And on one hand, I'm really excited. And on the other hand, as the therapist, I go, oh my God, that's going to bring so many more new problems. And I think this is potentially why I'm going to be doing, you know, conversations like this. It's why I'm going to be doing the teaching. It's why I'm going to be so passionate about educating other people about it, because just as they're coming towards my level, I'm already 20, 25 years in front of them. And I'm aware of that. I know that there is this chasm between me and the average therapist, me and the average social worker or police officer, because this has been my world for 25 years, easily. And it's second nature to me in terms of the technology happens to support my job as a psychotherapist and trainer. And it's one of the reasons why I had to slow myself down enough to write the book, because that's the other thing. Writing a book takes a long, long time. Doing things like this, and we've had a really, really in-depth conversation over a couple of hours, and there's something about this is how I think communication is moving in terms of 21, 22, 23. By 2025, I think most learning will be done in this particular way rather than book format. I think what will happen is for people who are, you know, want to read, and for me, I like reading and writing all over notes and stuff. For those people, they will be able to get a transcript, but I think this is the way that it will be done. It will be video.
The thing is, I have a YouTube channel as well, but when I was, you know, making videos, trying to grow the channel, I felt like it's very, you know, lonely, and people do not want to collaborate for growth. I feel like sometimes it tends to be a very selfish community. And and somewhere in that stage, I also had that, you know, thought that if I have to improve myself, if I have to improve my mentality, I need to surround myself with people who are more knowledgeable than me, and with people from whom I can learn something about. So this idea of a podcast came into my mind, that I can talk with brilliant people all around the world. Not only that I can learn myself, but I also can, you know, make content which will help others to grow in terms of their mindset, which is one of the main reasons why I have started this podcast, and till now it's really going really well.
Yeah, I don't know if I told you I did a podcast. I've actually put it on pause from the beginning of this year, mainly because I'm so busy with the PhD and some teaching and writing the second book and getting the first book prepped and everything, that at the moment it's on a pause. But yes, I echo that sometimes it can be lonely. But I also think that that's because sometimes we can be quite egocentric and we want to be the next big YouTuber. You know, as I say to people, I never intended to set out to be the next Jordan Peterson. I didn't set out to be Joe Rogan. I wanted to be putting stuff out there for when I get busy, people can go and listen to the cyber stuff, the cyber security, the human behavior, all of that kind of stuff is going to sit there. It's time memorial now. And whilst, you know, some of my thinking has changed and there are certain elements that, you know, I do look back at some podcast episodes and think, yeah, maybe that's not one that would go into a book now, because that's not quite what I've learned, or I've learned so much more since then. It doesn't mean that people can't go back and listen to the original thinking. And, you know, the same reason was I wanted to share with a therapeutic community why they needed to understand what was going on. And I veered off and I ended up going into biohacking and health and, you know, a bit into looking after your own mental health during COVID and back again. And, you know, and I've meandered. I've gone all over the place. But again, that's because I've got this huge broad spectrum of interest. So, you know, if people do want to listen to my podcast, they can listen to singular episodes or go the whole, you know, take the whole lot in. But I am noticing that I have what I'm calling podcast overload at the minute. I am so far behind on a number of the channels that I listen to that there's something about I don't have enough time in the day to do it anymore.
Talking about,
yeah.
Talking about, you know, being a YouTuber or podcaster, you know, many young people aspire to become the next big YouTuber or podcaster or a blogger. And when they tell that to their parents, the parents is like, what are you talking about? Because these are professions which they feel that it's unsafe, and probably it is unsafe or a little bit risky because it's not as stable as getting a job. But as a parent, how would you want to approach this kind of situation?
Well, I mean, it's probably the most sought after, because I usually say to the young people when they're talking, and I say, so do you want to Twitch or YouTube? You know, and often and that tells me whether they're a gamer or, you know, or whether they've thought about doing yada, yada, yada. And we have a conversation. I said, and usually I go, okay, who's the YouTubers that you watch? Who's the Twitchers that you're watching stream and so on, blah, blah, blah. We have this conversation. And the parents generally look at me like I'm talking a brand new language because they don't know that what was she saying to these children, twitching and streaming and whatever. And I will let parents know that it is a highly monetized area. It's a highly competitive area, and it can also be quite a highly toxic area as well. Sounds just like work. You know, do you want your child to be an accountant? Do you want them to be a banker? Do you want them to be a computer programmer? Or do you want them to do what they really love and be sponsored for doing so? And you can see them go, they can get sponsored. Like, yeah, that's what they're aiming for. But they have to be aware that nearly 28 other children in their classroom are also trying to do this, you know. So that makes every single school in this area, oh, not this area, that makes every single school in this county, oh, not this county, that makes every single child in this country, oh, not this country, that makes a lot of children around the world all trying to vie for the same spot in terms of being sponsored and getting subscribers. So, you know, sometimes it's cut and chance, sometimes it's good marketing. If your child wants to do this, be aware that they will have to put time, effort, and equipment into it, you know. And it's a case of saying the reality is it's not as easy as they think. But again, why not support a child around their education system to do something that's creative, that allows them to express themselves, and, you know, might just be that lucky winning moment where somebody says your content's great, let me take it from there. You know, I think jobs can be like this. You know, those opportunities in life, they do present themselves to a small percentage of people. The rest of us have to work really, really hard.
I think something similar happened with Justin Bieber. Like, he used to upload music on his YouTube channel, and one of the famous music producers liked his music and they made songs with him, and that's how it got started. I'm not 100% sure with it, but you know, when you are using the online platforms, you get both negative type of people and positive type of people, and sometimes the negative people can get really onto your nerves, and as young people it's very hard to, you know, deal with them because you haven't faced these kind of things before. And even if you go to your parents has no idea about how to deal with it because it's relatively new to them. So as young people, how do you deal with online negativity? And sometimes, you know, they even face harassment, different kinds of harassment, and, you know, they cannot, you know, they do not know how to deal with it or cope with it. So, you know, how do you advise young teens or young people to deal with the negative side of the internet?
Well, I mean, number one, this is the thing that brains are not prepared for, and it's certainly something that helping young people deal with that amount of negativity or toxicity is and can be difficult. What I don't ever do is tell them to just turn it off and understand the permanence of the internet. And I was saying, you know, it's like burying your computer in the garden doesn't mean that your data is safe, because it's contained all over the different spaces on the internet or servers or, you know, places of employment. But for young people experiencing cyberbullying, negativity, it's very hard to ignore it unless you carry out some of the actions that you can do nowadays, which is muting, blocking, reporting. But it's very difficult to ignore negativity as a human being, because that's how the brain is wired. So it can be difficult, and a lot of the time, I'm going to quote my a friend who actually said, consider people's negativity as an opinion, and opinions are like anuses. Everybody's got one. So it's a case of bring, you know, just like I did then, just bring a little bit of humor in sometimes to say, look, and in fact, with children that can tolerate this, I will say to them, look, there's a beautiful Zen Buddhist saying, what other people think of you is none of your business. So it's a way of, you know, it's hard. If somebody calls you a name, it strikes hard, because it ties into that thing I talked about right at the beginning. It's attachment, it's fear of abandonment, it's shame, it's negativity. We don't do very well at managing it. So learning how to do that as a younger child gives you the capabilities of being able to manage it as you get older. But when it's intensive, when it's like full on harassment and you're getting what's known as text bombed, or that there's too much of it coming in, it can be intolerable. And sometimes it's easier to close the lid and step away rather than turning it off, if that makes sense. So like in the first book I ever wrote, I talked about at the end of the day, when you come home from school, you can close your door. That's the end of the school day until the following morning. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. It is now 24/7 relentless. So sometimes it's about understanding that you are allowed to walk away from it, whatever it is, whether it's your computer, your smartphone. You can turn off social media in terms of deleting stuff on your smartphone, and you can wait a while, because sometimes so there's a saying of today's news is tomorrow's fish and chip paper. So obviously that's about the newspaper wrapping up fish and chips. If you are engaged in it and you're feeding the monster, so to speak, then it's going to stay there for some time. So again, it's always about balance. Everything that I work with in therapy is about, how does this person manage this issue? How do they find balance, and how do they use their inner resources to manage both things at once?
I think, as you know, people are aspiring to become or have a career on social media or on the internet, it is important to also acknowledge these things about the negative impacts, that an account might get hacked, or they can face negativity, or there's this rise of cancel culture, and they might get canceled as well. So
yeah,
these things are relatively new, but I think as people are aspiring to become these things, or bloggers or YouTubers, or have some kind of presence or following on social media, I think it's important to not only focus on the glory side or the monetary side or the fame side, but it's also important to focus on the negatives and the risks which these kind of things might have.
Yeah, and I will go back to something I said earlier, which is we don't know these full impacts. And as technology changes and as people use technology in a different way, there are new things popping up. So cancel culture wasn't a thing 5 years ago, but it is now. And in another 5 years, there will be another thing. And of course, when we learn what this is, it really helps to educate young people as to, okay, so not only are you going to be on a public platform, which now exposes you to more peer pressure, it also exposes you to the risk of people being crude, rude, nasty, abusive, flaming you, trolling you, you know, all of the phrases that are now coming up because we have a label for almost everything. But also, if you say something that offends or upsets somebody, you may be restricted in some way, either by the platform or by complaints that go in about your content. So there's something about, we are becoming I would say at the moment, we're becoming a species of pleasing each other and not being able to say what we really want. But also there are channels for you to be able to do that. So again, it's about explaining to young people, if you have quite extreme views, whether they be liberal, right wing, whether you want to talk in a particular way, then you have to find the platform that will allow you to air your views. But bearing in mind, when you have a view, people will disagree. Of course, there's going to be people that agree, but people will disagree. And what will you do with that information? How do you manage that here and now before you go online? Because online, there's less inhibition about being able to say things that wouldn't happen in the real world. So there's an understanding of, this is how you manage toxicity, and when you go online, it could be tenfold. And of course, you can't prepare for that kind of thing. That's like saying, how would you deal with an earthquake, but you get hit by a tsunami or a hurricane? Well, you prepared for the earthquake. You just didn't know what you were going to do with a tsunami or an earthquake. And again, none of us can do that. We can't prepare for something that we've never encountered. We could do our best at thinking about what we might do, but that could lead you down the road of anxiety about, oh my God, what if I said this? What if I said that? What if I don't do this? And, you know, that's the world of content creation, is you are always going to be in favor with some people, and you will not be favored by some. In fact, you won't be tolerated by some people, because, you know, and this is how I see what I'm doing. The book that I bring out is going to enrage some academics. Of course it is, because they're going to think it's utter BS that I've written. There are going to be some people who absolutely bloody love it. And my writing is for as many parents and professionals to understand the children. The arguments, if you like, between the academics that like or loathe my stuff is between me and them for a start off. And at the end of the day, I'm okay with the fact that people don't like my stuff. I'm okay with the fact that people don't like me. I'm okay with the fact that, you know, because I've done my deep work through therapy. I've done my deep work through maturing. I get that. I'm much older than a lot of the people that I work with, because they all tend to be 25 and under. So I'm all right saying, oh, you just need to put up with it or just ignore it, because I've learned those skills through growing up. I certainly didn't have them as a teenager, because if somebody said something that was one iota that I didn't like, it would leave me devastated for days. So again, it's an understanding of what it was like to be a young person and what it's like to have some of these things said, written, you know, and it's not easy. Learning to deal with humiliation and shame is probably the biggest part of personal development that I think any of us can go through.
Because it tests your character, and in real life also there are chances that you will get some kind of negativity, and probably it helps you to face this certain kind of negativity. But the problem arises when it gets too much, or you get too much cyberbullied, and also you do not get the support from the people who are close to you.
Yeah, and that's the most damaging thing for young people, is, if we go back to that example of telling your parents, it's when they're not believed, it's when they're not supported. And this is why I'm so pushy about therapists learning this stuff because they're going to need to know it. But these young people, not just young people, because it does happen to adults, but anybody who receives this amount of information, and I'm talking like information about themselves or how they're perceived, how much content they come into contact with, how many people are going to follow them, like them. You know, it happens so often with the television programs. We put people onto television programs, and the next thing is they've been through 2-3 auditions, you know, like whatever it is, Country's Got Talent, and the next thing is suddenly they're a superstar with no, it's almost like no formal training on how to be a celebrity. And of course it's too difficult for a lot of people, so that supportive network is high priority before you go into a culture where you're creating content which is well, it's like walking uptown, it's like walking in the village, it's like going to the park. People will look at you, people will make judgments, people will make assumptions. However, in the online space, the capacity for them to let you know what they're thinking is the difference.
And sometimes people can create fake accounts and stay anonymous and comment. And you won't even know who is the person who's commenting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like the word for cyberbullying that's German, and it's cyber mobbing. And for me, that brings up an element of, crowds coming and you know, having a go at a person. That's entirely what it feels like, whether it's one voice, 5 voices, or 5,000.
So what is the difference you see amongst young people before the age of technology and after the age of technology?
To be honest, I see the younger people now are more informed about their own choices. So I would certainly say there is more discussion about sexuality, gender, roles in life, job choices, privileges. There's just a lot more information about who they are growing up. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm sure that must have been a thing for people of my age, you know, the 30 years and upwards at the moment. But again, I think there's something about, it depends on how much reading people did. It depends on how much they wanted to know, because what children are finding out now when they come, and quite often the young people will say, God, you know a lot, Kath. And I said, because I read a lot. I don't just get it all off the internet. I've been reading books for a long, long time. And this is one of the things that the internet affords young people, is a lot of a broad span of information. The issue is also that broad span of information.
So I think it's pretty interesting to explore about these things, but I feel like people do not even have the will to learn about the impact of technology and what it might what kind of impact it might have in the future. I think it's important to think about it, to ponder about it, because this is what you are going to face. And I think a lot of people are not prepared for what's coming in. A lot of people are just depending on the knowledge they get from the degrees. A lot of people are just depending on the knowledge from the educational institution. And I think people in a whole, as large, they're not prepared for skill-based experience. They're not prepared for the industrial revolution, which is coming. I don't think that people are even aware of it, that it's coming. They are just depending on the degrees and well-established degrees, but they're not aware of it. So how do you know in a mass scale, how do you make people aware of it? Because, for example, if there are certain jobs, demand for jobs which are going to change the future or have a good impact, but you do not have the people who has the ability to do these kind of jobs. So, you know, I see that in the future, there can be a certain imbalance between the jobs which are in demand, but in the jobs, the people who do not have the enough supply. So how do you create the balance? And I'm asking it because we are the ones who are going to be doing those kind of jobs. And I sadly,
to
I
be
feel
perfectly
like,
honest, sure, there is something about I am waiting for your generation to come through and to deal with this, because I'm not so sure my generation cares, wants to learn, or and the reason I'm saying that is, in the next 20 years, the cohort of my generation, the ones who effectively created the internet, they're going to be heading towards retirement. They're not going to be interested in whether the jobs are there or not. What I think is really important at the minute are the 10 to 30-year-olds. When you move through as the new executives, as you move through as the new CEOs, the new politicians, the new teachers, governments, you're going to bring with you the experience of being around technology. You're going to bring with you the knowledge of, so like we were talking earlier, you will understand gaming, you will understand how technology facilitates, you will have watched how young people use that space and then how they change. So I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here in terms of, so my job's probably only going to last 20 years of educating therapists, because after that, you'll all probably know, in terms of, you might understand the technology in a much better way. But this is how I see things, is in 20 years time, you are the generation that's going to be moving technology even faster and educating the next generation underneath you. And I think all children now, from 25 years down, you know, maybe even 27 years down, you're all born to technology. There's no non-digital people. What there might be are less privileged countries in terms of technology access, and companies that provide that support in and around the regions. I think there will always be areas within the world where technology is never taken in. So, for example, the Himba tribe in Africa, they don't use any modern technology, let alone you know, technology that's digital. Maybe Aboriginal tribes may not bring a lot of this technology. I know that a lot of them do use the technology already, because I'm lucky enough to know somebody who works with them on an education basis. But technology is becoming demonetized, and it's more available. So the children who are under 5 now are going to be so technologically advanced by the time they're 25, because that's 30 years from now, that I don't see that there will be the same issues that we're currently facing at the moment.
And probably there's going to be more research-based data as well, because as it's very new to us right now, we do not have, you know, enough experiences or data which is going to, you know, say that, you know, this results in this, and this is the historical data, or this is the research which is proved, and this is the final result. And as you're talking about, in the underdeveloped countries, as far as I know, you know, almost half of the population of the earth does not have access to proper basic internet, let alone advanced technology. And what I feel,
4.8 billion connections to the internet currently exist, and that was at the end of 2020. So it's about half.
Yeah. So around 3 billion people do not have the infrastructure or even the basic needs, probably. So I think to progress as a human race, you just cannot let one side down, because and that's going to halve the speed of progress. So how can you, you know, make technology available to those parts of the world as well? Because if you can make them available to, you know, those remote parts as well, there's going to be a lot more companies like Amazon, Netflix, and even more creative startups which we do not have any idea about, because you're letting in more people get involved in it, and there's going to be outbursts of a lot more ideas, a lot more opportunities. And I think that's even hard to imagine what kind of opportunities it can bring. But for those opportunities to come, you first need to, make the internet and other technologies available for them. So how do you bring those people with you in terms of progress, as a progress of human race?
In one simple, you've named the company, okay, in terms of big giants. There are people who have more wealth than they know what to do with. Amazon could potentially supply the entire world with technology. They could. They're not going to, because unfortunately, one of the downsides of being a human is we have greed. And Jeff Bezos could resolve that issue. He could resolve hunger as well, worldwide hunger. When you look at Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and people from Apple, all the big companies, particularly Mark Zuckerberg, they could do something about this, but they choose not to. And I don't have an answer other than that's because they're human. I do see that when technology does become cheap enough, yes, it will be worldwide. But again, those gaps of affordability and class and privilege are always going to exist. And I think what we may have is a slow take up from the new areas that get connected. And the rest of us are 25 years in advance, because the internet is what we're talking about here when we talk about internet connection. And just think about what that's doing in a social justice issue. Nearly 4 billion people have never been on Facebook. 4 billion people have never shopped online. 4 billion people have never read the news. 4 billion people have never been exposed to those issues that we've talked about today. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but certainly in the development of humankind, I don't think there's ever been such a big divide as there is now with technology, in terms of, tools that existed. Many humans throughout evolution have been able to design tools that would, take the skin off an animal and, something they could cook it in, or something they could make a fire with. We've always had that level of equality in some way, shape or form, because we've all had the same brain thinking and access to the same sort of environment. And by that I mean rocks, trees, pretty much the land that we live on. Whereas now we've got some percentage of the world, and okay, as we talked about earlier, brilliant that Elon Musk is making a reusable rocket. That's not really helping the other 4 billion people, is it? It's like right now we've had Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson popping off into space, which is fantastic. And I'm really excited about that. And I'd love to do it. But also, we've still got people starving on the planet. We've got global warming going on. We've got, we've got a crisis around us. And yet we've got the technological privilege on the other hand. So I don't know the full answer to that, Masha. I don't know how we can do that, because there's a them and an us in this kind of feeling at the minute. I think it's a much bigger question. And actually, if you do get somebody on your podcast that can answer that, please let me know, because I'd love to listen in and then have a conversation, because I don't know what the answers are.
The reason I'm concerned about it is because I feel like it halves down the speed of progress in terms of the human race in general, because you can imagine that half of the world is being cut out, and where half of the world is watching Jeff Bezos going to space, and the other half is fighting for even the basic needs, let alone the internet.
Yes.
Internet is not the basic need. So whenever I think about the progress of humanity, I feel like if you can include, both sides, that's going to exponentially speed up the growth and the opportunities which we can have in terms of as a human race as a whole. And you cannot even imagine what kind of opportunities there can be, because different people have different ideas, different skill sets. You just need to give them the knowledge, give them the platform, which the internet has given us to many people. And many people are having a great impact by spreading what they're knowledgeable about, what they're skillful about. But the other half is getting little to no opportunity. And I think that's something which really concerns me, and it does make me feel sad as well, because they do deserve it, because they're people like us, they're normal people.
And that's been so I co-authored a journal article with some other therapists, and one of the things that we highlighted was this privileged assumption that everybody had access to the internet, when I'm fully aware that they didn't. And and that's just the world that we live in at the moment. I think it's a really, really big and really important question that you've asked there, and I wish I could answer it with well, it's all right, I'm just going to give Jeff Bezos a ring or Elon Musk and say, could you put some of your money over here? Because it probably wouldn't even make an indent on their bank account, really, would it? They might think, oh, that's going to take me 2 years to recoup. It's probably not going to damage them for life. But I think it's a very big meta question.
I do feel like, yes, the rich people can do more, but I feel like there's a sense of disunity in terms of normal people as well, because normal people also have the power, more power than before, because we have the internet. But instead of just collectively helping the people who are in need, I think we are focusing too much on hating the billionaires and the rich people. And it's not like, I'm not supporting the idea that they're not helping monetarily, but what I'm trying to tell is that it's not like they're not doing it, they're not doing anything. And what Elon Musk is doing, I think it's pretty great, because he is trying to fuel up the speed of transitioning towards electric cars, and that is going to reduce the overall impact of CO2 emissions. So it's not like he's not doing anything, but he's probably doing more than the average people who is just hating him on the internet for no reason.
And he's just put up £10 million with the X Prize for, oh no, it might have been more than that actually, because it's £10 million every X Prize normally, but I think he just put some money in, and I'm trying to, it's a lot of money for people to come up with ways that we could potentially do biodiversity farming, biodiversity impact, and all about climate control. So, I do know that, yes, they do put their money in their pockets in one way, shape or form, but also there's a lot of greed at the top of this pyramid. And I do think that there's a lot more that we could do. I don't think that we quite know how to do that at the moment. Otherwise, we would be doing it.
I was wondering that technology is a great tool, but I feel like a lot of people do not know how to use it properly. So I wanted to ask you this question, that how can young people or people younger than me can use technology to prepare themselves for the upcoming future?
Again, I think another massive question. I think we need to understand it as the people who are developing the technology, people who have been around the technology, people who are watching the people growing up with the technology. And of course, we still don't know what we're doing with it, including people of my age. We are we've created something that is expanding a bit like the universe, so that the cyber synapses that exist, this is one of my particular phrases, is the cyber synapses that are increasing are because so many of us are present and doing what we're doing. And, you know, I think that the way that technology is changing, given that we're going to be using haptic stuff soon, we've already got haptic vests and haptic feedback gloves and technology that allows you to be much more in contact with the technology. I think, you know, we're heading towards Star Trek, Star Wars, some of the stuff that's sci-fi will become sci-fact. So again, a little bit like I said earlier, in terms of preparing for the earthquake, we have to be thinking about what's the disaster that might be coming that we don't even know is coming. So it's a not knowing as well. I think responsible use of technology is always an interesting phrase, because I don't actually know what that means. That's like responsible use of life, you know, responsible use of being in the real world. It's what we do with technology and why we do with technology. I think that's what we need to explore, and hopefully, you know, that's what my book will do, as the first conversation about the whats and the whys and the hows and the wheres and the whens. But again, I suspect my book will be out of date within the next 2 to 5 years, because there will be so much more that we're doing, that there's another reason why we're doing what we're doing, and there's more knowledge, etc., etc. So again, yeah, I'm kind of a little bit stuck with that question, but at the same time, I don't know that I could fully answer it.
Are you optimistic about the future or pessimistic?
I'm kind of in between. I'm optimistic in terms of what will come that will enhance our ability to do things. I'm slightly pessimistic about how it will be used by the privilege gap, but by the perpetrators, by people who have ill intent. And I think pessimistic for the people who are way behind in terms of owning technology, understanding technology, and, you know, like everything that we've talked about today.
I think this episode was a very deep and intellectual type, but I feel like it's not, you know, possible to cover every type of topic, you know, which we have in mind within this one single episode.
Oh, so absolutely. This is this is what I say to people when I say my training takes at least 2 days and they want me to do it in an hour or a couple of hours. And I'm saying, you're asking me to do a really big subject, because people don't understand just how big a subject it is. But certainly this is not something, you know, I mean, we've answered quite a lot of questions, but again, there's not a lot that we have covered, because we've done what I call bunny hopping. We've done like tiny little touches of each topic. I suspect this would have to be a 5 to 6 hour conversation, you know, and we've done half of that, and my bladder's holding up to the end of its patience level now. So, you know, there is something about, yes, it's been a massive conversation, and I've really loved doing it with you. So
to conclude, what are your top 3 lessons which you want the young people in general to learn?
Okay, so the first one would be, there is nothing wrong with you, in terms of people saying that you're addicted, or that you, what I mean by that is, you are using technology that my generation and above designed for you to use, and now we're berating you for it. So number one, just look upwards and just go, you lot designed the playground that we're now playing in. Please don't tell us off for falling off the roundabout, you know, or the climbing frame, or whatever it is that you designed. Again, the idea of there's nothing wrong with you. You're doing the best that you can in a world that's been designed for you. And us as the grown-ups haven't always done a great job of helping you learn how to regulate your nervous systems, how to live in and around technology, because we didn't understand it when we designed it properly anyway. And the third one would be, there are always going to be times when you feel that you are using your technology too much, and it does have an impact. And that can be the same for any, you know, whether it's exercise, cigarettes, whatever it is that you're doing. Most of the time, I would say awareness is the key, and stepping away from things is a good way to get a bit of a reset. Now, this is what I'm talking about here, is your nervous system and your thinking. Walking away from things is always a great reset, but notice, if you can, what draws you back and why, because that's one of your driving factors. So do you want to go back because you miss people? Do you want to go back to social media because you want to see what your friends doing? Do you want to go back to social media because you feel like you're not part of your crowd anymore, that you feel that you know, it's always noticing. But at the end of the day, it's incredibly hard not to use technology when everything that we do is in the technology. So, you know, we're almost asking you to abstain from breathing because breathing might actually produce an illness. You know, you need the air, you need it. And you need this technology for you to function at whatever it is that you're doing, particularly education now in the 2021. You need this technology. So, you know, people using phrases like, you're addicted, you're never off it, there's something wrong with you, why can't you put that thing down? Actually, your life exists in it, through it, and with it. So, you know, this technology is part of you and your growing up, your maturing, and your understanding of being in the world and who you are.
I think these are some things which people need to think about instead of just taking it as words, because as I mentioned before, people do not think about things deeply these days, I think. So, Catherine, I think that was a really fruitful conversation, and I hope our listeners will get some value out of it. And I certainly did get a lot of value out of it. And I do not get people often, I do not get often people in my life with whom I can talk about these things. These are things of also my interest as well, but I don't see people interested about these things that much. So it was really nice talking with you, Catherine. And I hope that we will do a second episode maybe in the future, because you seem to have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things. So
oh, well, thank you.
Is enough.
Like I said, I've been reading books for a long time.
Yeah, and another thing I want to say is that you do not need to learn about something. You do not need to have a degree or something like that. And Elon Musk again, he comes here again as well. He said that he learned to make rockets by reading books and meeting with people who are specialized in that kind of area, even though he has a physics background. And just by self-learning, he's chief engineer of one of the most successful space companies. So
yeah,
and I think that what would your advice be for people who want to learn things but are not interested in reading books? For example, I want to learn a lot of things, but I find reading books to be really slow and monotonous.
YouTube, Audible, podcasts, the way that we consume information now is changing. What I would say though is, when you do go and look at a podcast or a YouTube video, do have a look at what they say and read the comments, because the people who disagree will be in the comments, and see who they recommend and go and listen to the oppositional perspective, because that's how critical thinking works. Don't believe the first thing that you read, don't believe the first thing that you watch. And for me, that's one of the things about learning is, I might have read a book at age 17 and thought, okay, that's how biochemistry worked. And then I've been confronted with, I don't know how many books over the last 15, 20 years where it's absolutely challenged what I thought I understood. That's how knowledge improves. So always, visual, auditory ways are, you don't have to sit down and read a book. You can consume knowledge in whatever way you want that works for you. And again, always go and see if you can find a counter argument, because that's how broad critical thinking exists.
That was a really great answer as usual. So thank you, Catherine, for coming to my show.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll do another episode in the future.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.